Hello and welcome back to another one of these tier list ranking videos. Now, it's actually been a while this time since I did the Fourth Doctor one, and the reason for that is that I was trying to launch another series, a review of all the Modern Who series, and I've spent all week editing and doing the Rose video, and the BBC have blocked me every single time to the point where I've just given up and gone back to this. So yes, that's incredibly frustrating. So this is just a palate cleanser after a week of wanting to destroy YouTube and smash up my computer. Trying desperately to get around BBC's stupid blanket copyright rules that do not allow anything to go online. Anyway, let's kick off with the Peter Davison era, an era I am decidedly mixed on, because it's an era that's very low on character for either the Doctor or the companions. There's not a lot of chemistry between them, but it's an era with quite a lot of good stories. The weak stories start to come in, and those problems that would really start to hamper those later 80s Doctors, particularly Colin Baker, are starting to creep in. And there are some dull exploits, but there are some phenomenal stories in here as well. So I'll just kick off the list. Again, we're doing chronologically in these 6 categories, which I'm not going to explain again like you're idiots or something, because it says them there. Castrovalva. Okay. I don't have anything particularly negative to say about Castrovalva. I enjoy the Doctor's regeneration acid trip almost. His regeneration moments where he is thinking that he's previous Doctors, thinks he's Jamie in the Underground, thinks he's the first Doctor. It's nice. Having him unravel the scarf is a bit bound to infuriate the older fans, but I don't mind it. I think it's an okay plot, but the Master and Adric stuff and the actual plot of the episode does nothing for me. The setting is gorgeous. I think Castrovalva itself is a beautiful setting, both the planet and the complex when they actually arrive, but it just sort of moves at a very slow pace, this one for me. So it's okay, there's nothing objectively wrong with it, but I don't find it a particularly fun watch either. The same can be said for 4 to Doomsday, so I'll put behind Castrovalva. 4 to Doomsday. It's some interesting ideas, interesting depictions of different cultures, but at the end of the day, this one didn't really do a lot for me. The villains are quite weak, the plan was week. I was starting to warm to the Doctor and his companion's relationship. Burt Crouch's in it, and I think he's a brilliant actor. It was lovely to see him, but this one didn't really do a lot for me. But I didn't. Again, you have to be properly bad to reach to end up in one of those columns. Actively annoy me. Kinder, great. First 2 great of this era. There is a faction of fans out there who think this story is overrated, but I think it's a brilliant story. With the little boxes, and the Mara is such a creepy villain. I think that Tegan's dream sequences are possibly the creepiest segments in all classic Who, maybe in all of Doctor Who. I think they are incredibly well done and well shot. Nissa unfortunately doesn't get anything to do, but there was behind the scenes reasons for that. Adric is actually okay, but you just want him to stay on side with the guy who's having this mental breakdown. And it's an interesting take on mental illness as well. And the woman who the Doctor ends up almost traveling with is his best companion, even though she's just basically a one-off companion for this episode. I don't think there's anyone who works as well. The same way that I think that the 6th Doctor's best companion is Sabalon Glitz from The Ultimate Foe. Because I never really warmed to any of 5 or 6's close Doctor-companion relationships. I think 5 and Nissa are good, but we don't get enough of them. So the 5th Doctor with, I can't remember what the woman's name is, but the woman from Kinder is great. And yeah, the Mara, they really should come back in New Who, because I think it's a phenomenally done villain with 2 brilliant stories that I will be highly praising here. The Visitation. Great. Not quite as good as Kinder, but it's a great story. 4 parts. I love the pterodactyls. I love that random thespian that they're with. I love the explanation of the Great Fire of London. It's kooky, it's quirky, it's fun, and it gets dark in places when it wants to. All the companions, again, Nissa sort of gets the short shaft. Is that the right turn of phrase? Nissa sort of gets pushed to the side a little bit. She has to go in the TARDIS and stand around and wait for some people to come to her. But in general, I think it's a very good story. It's good fun. Again, you know, this whole era is thin on character, but when the plots are great, they really are. And I think this is easily among the highlights of this era for me. Black Orchid is good. I like Black Orchid. When I did my, I don't want to say 50th out of, I'm not putting, not absolute classic. We're not going that far. When I did my Doctor Who Day in the 23rd of November, I watched a single story from each Doctor. I watched Black Orchid for Pete Davidson because it's only 2 parts and it's quick and easy and accessible. And there was a lot of 2-parters that John Nathan Turner tried to bring back that format to the fold. This is the only one that works. The other 2 are guff. It's the only pure historical after the Highlanders in 1967. So that's a fun little detail. I like the cricket matches. I like the murder mystery. There's nothing special about it, but it's a nice, fun, an unusual tone for an episode. But it just lets the cast, who have sort of just moaned and complained their way through, just actually relax and have fun and enjoy their adventures and do the Charleston and dance and go to watch cricket and whatever, you know, just actually enjoy themselves in a very Unicorn and the Wasp style way. The characters feel like they're having fun at the same time, which is a nice change of pace for an era when no one really felt like they wanted to be there for parts of it. Earthshock, absolute classic. Not sure how I need to explain this. The first part is this creepy adventure episode where it's just pure exploration and there's these androids, and then the part 1 cliffhanger kicks the story up a gear with the return of the Cybermen after 7 years at this point. And Earthshock, I'll call it now, is the only good Cyberman story outside of the 60s. They were consistently, obviously they were only ever used once in the 70s, that's Revenge of the Cybermen. And through the 80s, they were used quite a few times, but this is the only one that they got them right. Between the 60s and arguably all the way to New Who, I don't think they did the Cybermen as well as this. And they are just basic, generic Cybermen. They don't try and convert anyone. Their plan is just to kill people. So you could argue that it's not a good Cyberman story in that sense, but they are good in it. David Banks is fantastic. I love the design of these Cybermen. It's just a really great story with a gut punch of an ending, even for those of us who don't particularly warm to Adric. I don't hate Adric, but I definitely do not warm to him whatsoever. A great ending with his death and the shattered star in the silent credits. It shows that this era has actual stakes. Something that it did actually show on other occasions, but Doctor Who, they often planned to kill off companions, and I appreciate JNT for this because Graham Williams and Robert and Philip Hinchcliffe both had these plans to kill off companions. Leela was going to get killed, K9 was going to get killed, Sarah Jane was going to get killed, and they backed out on all of those occasions. They didn't want to go through that. They didn't want to put the audience through killing off a beloved companion. And while Adric is not beloved by, you know, anyone, it still shows that the series got stakes and the characters can and will die on occasion. And it remains one of the sort of most heartbreaking classic Who moments. I'll never know if I was right. And the reaction of everyone, the Doctor not being able to save him, and the other 2 companions just starting to cry in the TARDIS. It's a brilliant ending, which should have been a brilliant ending for season 19, which would have been a very solid season, as you can see by that. Unfortunately, someone came up with the idea that we should have another episode after that. And maybe the idea was that we could deal with the fallout of Adric's death, but no one bothered to tell whoever wrote the script that was the premise, because Time Flight just has another plot and it doesn't really care that Adric's dead. It has him turn up in a dream at one point, but it really doesn't give a toss about what it's doing. It's very poorly put. I don't know if it has a high budget or no budget, because the stuff in the airport and all that thing looks incredible. They've got a jet plane. They've got, all these staff. They're filming at Heathrow. But when we get to prehistoric Earth, not good. Not good. The plot is stupid. The villain is stupid. It's the first real dud of Davidson's era, and it's a real drag on what's an otherwise very good season. Not a fan of this one. Arc of Infinity. Bad. Now, I suppose some people might say this as harsh, but Omega is one of my favourite villains ever. Those planes are getting worse. Omega is one of my favourite ever villains. There's no doubt about that. I love the 3 Doctors. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit when I talk about the 5 Doctors. How can you get this wrong? Gallifrey, Omega, Davidson with Nyssa. How can they make it so dull? Why did they redesign Omega into this weird looking thing? Why does he have a chicken bodyguard? Why did we go to Amsterdam, akin to the Paris filming of City of Death, and not utilise it whatsoever? They might as well have been in London or Liverpool. It's not like City of Death where it plays into the plot. They just spent the money in Amsterdam for no reason. Why? This is the total devaluation of Gallifrey. It started in Tom Baker's era, but it totally destroys itself here. They are so dull. Do you think the Time Lords from the War Games would have spent 3 episodes debating about whether they could legally kill the Doctor or not? No flipping way. They would have just done it probably with their eyes. They would have just done it with their minds. They could torture people with their minds in the War Games. They were so strong and powerful. And was it worth it? Was any of this worth it? We spent lots of episodes with the Time Lords debating whether the Doctor, whether they can legally kill the Doctor because Time Lords are too moral and don't do that. Oh man, this one just drags. The only thing keeping it out of terrible is Nyssa, who is amazing in this, because they wrote the part for Leela and then they just gave Nyssa all the proper strong warrior woman things to do, pulling a gun on some Time Lords, that kind of jazz. But again, that would have been more impactful if it was Leela, because she was living with the Time Lords. She's a member of Time Lord Society. Oh, this one's just a mess. I understand JNT wanted to bring back a big villain every season. Why? Did he have to wreck the villains as he did it? Could have just given us a normal Omega story, didn't have to. Snake Dance is a great story. It honestly could push into classic, but I'll leave it there. I think it's so good. Martin Clunes is brilliant. Nyssa, again, is brilliant when she is the sole companion. I know technically Tegan's with him in this episode as well, but because she's being possessed by the Mara, Nyssa is left with a sole companion gig, and I think she is really great in that role. Yeah. Martin Clunes, did I mention Martin Clunes? He's brilliant. It's just a creepy tone and an atmosphere, and the Mara look great. They clearly put a lot of the budget into that. Yeah, I would just say, if you think this is the weaker of the 2 Mara stories, maybe fair enough, but this has an unfair reputation, this story. I think it is a genuinely great sequel to Kinder. Mordred Undead is great. I won't put it above Snake Dance. Actually, I will. I think it's a brilliant story. Yes, the Turlough's plan for the Black Guardian and this story acting as the beginning of the Black Guardian trilogy maybe doesn't work all that well because it doesn't ever really go anywhere, but we don't actually know that yet. And this episode, why is this episode so great? Well, 2 words: Nicholas Courtney. Another 4 words: Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. That's 5 words. That's 5 words. Mordred Undead's a great story. There's 2 brigadiers, one with a mustache, one without a mustache. We've got timey-wimey shenanigans, great flashback sequences, an interesting plot that, yes, was written for Ian Chesterton. Why is the brigadier now a maths teacher? But it's nice and fun, and there's a very interesting plot about these, I don't know what they're like, immortal pensioners, basically, who need the Doctor for something. I can't remember, but it was interesting. I remember really enjoying this one and thinking that it was a great story. And for me, it was the highlight of season 20, which was an okay season in general. Terminus. I was on a good run there, talking about 2 good stories on the spin. Yeah, this era was very inconsistent. Terminus is the middle chapter of the Black Guardian trilogy. It's when the Black Guardian trilogy comes to a bit of a grinding halt narrative-wise. It's just a lot of the Black Guardian talking to Turlough and telling him that you must kill the Doctor, and he's going, oh, I don't know if I can, it's very difficult. And I think he's sort of at his worst in this episode. Him and Tegan are just bickering the whole way through, and his actions nearly cost Nyssa her life. Nyssa gets an okay exit. It's not one I'm particularly fond of. There's a weird dog creature, and they up the stakes really unnecessarily when, you know, Nyssa being stuck in the middle of a plague ship is enough. We don't need this ship is the center of the universe, and if it blows, it will destroy the entire galaxy. We don't need that. We've got enough stakes. And the weird dog thing, I'm not having. And it cures people, or what? This is just not a well thought out plan. It's not a very good looking story. It's just trawling around the interior of a spaceship for 4 episodes. And it's not particularly impressive. It's not particularly fun. I actually own this one on DVD, but only because it came in the Black Guardian box set with 2 other great stories, Mordred and Dead and Enlightenment, which I think is a gem. Honestly, to put it above Kinder? No, but I'll put it in great. I think it's a really great story, brilliant looking story as well with the ships. It's such a high concept idea, these immortals taking these ships from, you know, just from normal Earth all over the place and using them. I think it's just a great idea. It's a great plot, great premise. Linda Barrett is brilliant in it. The immortals are played really well. I think the companions are great. It's actually a very interesting use of Turlough in his final chapter of the Black Guardian trilogy, with him, you know, refusing to kill the Doctor and take enlightenment, and, you know, just deciding to take the moral route instead. Unfortunately, I'm not sure they ever knew what to do with this character after that, but it's interesting final take. I think Davidson's good in this. I think everyone's on top form, and there's some very interesting depictions of the immortals as well, particularly with the creepy guy that's with Tegan, who just doesn't really understand all these human emotions and feelings. And yeah, I think it's an interesting one. It's a very good story and a very solid way to end out the Black Guardian trilogy. And once again, it's this penultimate story in the season, which could have been a great ending for the season. And then they just chuck some crap at the end. And that crap is the King's Demons. Now, I'm going to have to talk about this now because it explains some of the things I'm going to say later. I talked about how Gallifrey was devalued. Well, no one is devalued in the 80s like the Master. He is given the most consistently stupid plots ever imaginable. And this is the one that always sticks out to me. This is the man who in the 70s, you know, tried to get his power from gods and, you know, from the daemons. He tried to take control of the Doomsday Weapon. I'm just thinking of season 8, just off the top of my head. He nearly started a nuclear war, just for being petty. He used the Autons to do his bidding. He was a powerful character with very good plots a lot of the time. He wasn't a joke. He becomes a joke. If he wasn't a joke by Time Flight, he becomes a joke here. His plan is to conquer the universe by disturbing the signing of the Magna Carta. That is a plan. He believes that if he disturbs the signing of the Magna Carta, he'll prevent democracy, change the history of the planet Earth, take over Earth, with no other plan other than stopping the Magna Carta, and then from Earth he can go and take over the universe. This character has become an absolute joke, and that is the biggest deterrent here, because okay setting, some nice historical stuff, okay sword fights, chameleon, but that turns the Master into an absolute joke. And that is one of the most consistently poorly written things that meant I could never really get on board with Anthony Ainley. He never had a good plot, ever. You know, from Legopolis, all he did was, you know, basically blag his way around the story and then decide to hold the universe to ransom for no reason at the end, you know, or you know, we've had him in Time Flight and what's the other one we had him in? Castrovalva, and he had bad plots in these, but this is the peak, and they never were quite able to redeem him from these lows because they never gave him a decent idea of how he was going to achieve any of his aims. Why am I getting an advert for holiday extras and theme parks? Who knows? They never gave him a decent idea, a decent plan, and that's what was so frustrating. That's why I could never really get behind his take on the character, other than the general campiness and pantomime nature of his version. The Five Doctors, oh, this is controversial. It's good, but I don't think it's by any means a classic. I know I put the Three Doctors in the absolute classic bracket, but for me, the Three Doctors is a great plot, which is enhanced by some lovely fan service. This is a non-entity of a plot, which keeps our interest because of tons and tons of generally unnecessary fan service, which makes it watchable and slightly fun as a viewer, but there's no real substance to any of it. You know, there's just stuff that happens because it happens. You know, when we're meeting lots of different companions, and they do work it in, and I think Terrence Dick's script is okay. And I like the Gallifreyan stuff for once, but I'm not sure we needed a fleet of Cybermen. We definitely didn't need the first Doctor to find some Daleks. I'm not sure what the Yeti adds to the plot. There's just a lot of fan service stuff to be like, hey, remember that? Remember that? Whereas it just doesn't really do very much for me. And the plot itself is good, but not anything particularly special in terms of the legacy of Rassilon. I do like that it's Barusu's betrayal, because we've had a few stories on Gallifrey and he's always been an ally. Sometimes we've suspected him, but he's always ended up being an ally, but never a totally trustworthy ally. So to have him, who's been a recurring character for the past couple of years, be the one who betrays the Doctor, I think that works. I think the Master's part of this is quite good. And I really enjoy, one of the weird aspects that I enjoy is how the different Doctors get inside the tomb of Rassilon. So, and I think it talks a lot about their Doctors, and it says a lot about those Doctors. The first Doctor walks through the door. The second Doctor goes underground and buries his way in. And the third Doctor zip slides his way onto the roof. I think that sums up all those Doctors perfectly. And there's a lot of good stuff like that where I can be like, oh, that's nice little details, but it doesn't come together as a full piece for me. I can't quite put my finger on why, but it's still good, but I think it's the fan service carrying it to that. Also, I don't particularly like Richard Hundle as the first Doctor. I think, much like the Twice Upon a Time iteration, well, actually, I think the Twice Upon a Time iteration was a better version in terms of the acting and stuff. But I think they just misunderstand his character, and it's like, oh, well, what was the first Doctor like? Well, he was grouchy, and he was, well, actually, he really kind of wasn't. He had the real twinkle in his eye. He had the mischievous laugh. He had the, and all that stuff got cut for just kind of generic old guy, grumpy old guy. And I think I find him a frustrating take on the first Doctor. They just shouldn't have had him in the story if they couldn't do him justice. But there's a hot take for you. Warriors of the Deep, one of the most hated stories ever, and I think it's actually okay. Yes, the marker looks stupid, but I really like the tone of this one. I know a lot of people slag that off, the ending, there should have been another way, but I love the fact that it's so hopeless and that the Doctor has to basically commit double genocide at the end of the story. He doesn't have to, but he does. The Silurians and the Sea Devils are total window panic. This is another example of JNT wanting to just, you know, to engage the viewership by being like, hey, remember these monsters from the past? Well, we're bringing them back. But he doesn't have a plot to do that, just like with Omega. And also sort of like with Earthshock, where the plot doesn't, the Cybermen aren't really necessary to the plot. In fact, the episode is very good, but the Cybermen aren't really the reason why it's very good. And Warriors of the Deep is okay, but hampered by production issues. I do love the ending. Silurians and Sea Devils are sort of wasted. There's some really quite lame cliffhangers, interesting plot, and a nice bit of Cold War paranoia, but I don't know. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people make it out to be. I've seen some people call it the worst Doctor Who story ever. I know Michael Grade used it on Room 101 when he was talking about why he hated Doctor Who and why he tried to kill off the show. but I think it's all right. I actually own this one as well. Again, because it came in a box set. I wouldn't have bought it normally. It came with Silurians and Sea Devils, so I bought it in a box set. But I can see myself watching it again. I think it's okay. It's not too bad. The Awakening is bad, but just pushes into bad. The Awakening, I would probably describe as the most forgettable Doctor Who story ever. I genuinely cannot remember what the flip was going on in that. There's that guy who comes out of the wall. There's some people pretending to be in a battle, like battle reconstructions. There's something going on that's causing them to act like that. It's 2 parts of fluff with no actual substance. It's poor, it's weak. I have nothing to say because I cannot remember what happened in it. And I think I could probably give you a decent resume of what happens in every single Doctor Who story, classic and new, with the exception of The Awakening. And I think that says it all, but basically. Frontios, terrible. The worst Davidson story. I've seen a lot of people who love it, and fair enough, but I cannot get past the slugs. Davidson's almost out of character in this whole story. There's about 6 or 7 times where he talks about, oh, I shouldn't interfere. Like, we passed that years ago. Always interfere. Always do what you're best at. Oh, the Time Lords would like this. Well, you never care normally. Oh, don't tell anyone I was here. Why? Why are you acting like this? Why? Turlough goes into Catatonia for some reason. There's a dull and predictable and forgettable guest cast. I have no love for this one whatsoever. I have no gripes. Time Flight, at least, is slightly fun, so maybe I can move it into bad from terrible, but this one, no way. It's boring, it's bad, it's cardinal sin after cardinal sin. It's not among the very worst ever episodes. I can't rant about it like I could about the Web Planet or the 2 Doctors or the Twin Dilemma, Invasion of Time, those kind of stories. But it is just genuinely awful. And Davidson's last series, he is generally at his best, but the plots have really derailed at this point. Resurrection of the Daleks, good. Doesn't totally make sense. It's just 2 factions killing each other, but I love that it's such a bloodbath. That's what makes this story so interesting, is the fact that it's just butchering people left, right, and centre. The Daleks have a huge kill count, something like it's higher than the Terminator, the kill count in this story, and that plays into Tegan's exit at the end when she leaves because she's just seen too much death, which is a great exit, and I think is one of the best classic Who companion exits. Totally underrated. And I think the new 45-minute format works much better than it did in season 22, possibly just because the pacing is much better than it was in those season 22 stories. But yeah, I think this is a decent story. Terry Malloy arrives as Davros, big improvement on David Gunnarsson, great performance. There's a lot of good stuff here, but it's a little bit too confused to truly push into the great column. And I can't put my finger on why, but something about the plot is a little bit messy. There's maybe a few too many plot strands going on. But I do think this is a slightly underrated one. Planet of Fire. Okay, it's a bit of a... There's some decent stuff in here. I think Perry's pretty decent. I like Turlough's exit, and the actual planet itself is good. Negatives, the Master being treated like an absolute joke. Tiny Master, Chameleon being brought back for no apparent reason. Again, not a lot to say about this one. It's got some good stuff, but I didn't really click with it. I wouldn't be in a rush to watch this one again, but it's not aggressively bad, and it's an okay ending. Turlough leaves, and the Doctor's left with this brand new companion, Perry, and I slagged off Logopolis for having these brand new companions at the end of Tom Baker's tenure, because it meant he died around companions that he didn't feel like he had any connection to. And I pushed that as a real negative of that. But it's possibly one of the biggest strengths of the Caves of Androzani. Absolute classic. This is the easy pick. Earthshock is an absolute classic, yes, but it could push into great, and I wouldn't have too much of an issue with that. Any other position on this list for that episode would be a crime. This story is phenomenal. It's immense. Robert Holmes was finally brought back. Lord knows why JNT got rid of him after season 17, because he's a flipping genius easily Classic Who's best writer, even above Douglas Adams. And he delivers his last true classic. Oh, this is so, so good. Shara's Jack. I love the fact that the Doctor continues to sacrifice himself for this person who he doesn't hardly know, and that's why it works, because he hardly knows her. His naivety and his heroism have never been on greater display. He's phenomenal in this story. Episode 1 cliffhanger, brilliant. Episode 3 cliffhanger, arguably the greatest in all Classic Who. Genuine, you cannot believe that it's just stopped playing, because it's like, go on, next episode, next episode. It's that level of intensity. It's a grim story. Everyone is evil other than the Doctor and Perry. Everyone is out for themselves. Every single character. They're self-serving, they're manipulative, and they all end up dead. All of them. And it's a gory, horrible bloodbath with some campy elements that don't quite work, such as the dragon, but that's such a tiny part of the story. That's just the reason why they can't go down to that cave. This story is about these like Spectrox running and this sort of war with these androids. Shara's Jack is immense. Oh, I'm so glad that this list, although it got negative for a bit towards the end, I can end by talking about a phenomenal story like this. This is incredible television. And it should have been the end for season 21. It's such an amazing high for Peter Davison to go out on. Easily one of the greatest Classic Who stories of all time. I'm a big fan of this one. But what are your feelings on that? Feel free to tell me your feelings on this era, these companions, and these stories in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. And I'll see you for Colin Baker's video, which I've got a feeling is not going to make me very many friends, because I'm really not a fan of his era.